Welcome to this episode of TAC Tic Talk. And this month we'll be getting deep into the tic with this interview on Vertebral Subluxation Complex with Dr. Mark Studin. I'm Joe Bush, Doctor of Chiropractic and editor of the American Chiropractor magazine, with Jacqueline Toussard, publisher, my sister as well, as we go into the finer definitions associated with what we do and its impact on not only the patient, but billing and the future of the profession. So listen on. In this TIC talk, Vertebral Subluxation Complex versus Patho-Neuro-Biomechanical Lesion, in which author Dr. Mark Studin, who co-authored with Dr. Eric Kaplan, talk on these important points. Welcome. This is our weekly edition of the TAC TIC talk. So this is our augmented content associated with the print magazine that we've been carrying forward, Mark. So thank you for joining us. We wanted to get all of our most famous contributors, on the early shows. And of course, you wrote an article this month, co-authored with Dr. Eric Kaplan, another famous and longtime contributor to the American Chiropractor magazine, but on Vertebral Subluxation Complex versus Patho-Neuro-Biomechanical Lesion, right? And I really wanted to talk to you today because this is a theme that you've carried forth over the years in your articles, the importance of using the term vertebral subluxation complex, not popular in all schools of thought throughout chiropractic, but you've continuously carried that drumbeat forward. So I'm really interested in just kind of jumping right in and talking to you about that. So, Mark, what is it about this terminology that you feel is important in how we practice?
Well, vertebral subluxation complex is a wonderful historical piece of information. It's got some issues because there really is no hard research in the scientific community about the chiropractic vertebral subluxation complex. So I thought long and hard for more than a decade. Do I consider putting out literature suggesting we change the name to a Patho-Neuro-Biomechanical Lesion? Now, if you look at vertebral subluxation complex, that was really started by Dr. Leonard Fay back in the 60s. And interestingly enough, I actually interviewed, I have a personal relationship with Dr. Fay. He's out in California, and I actually interviewed him many times, but as recently as about 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago when I started writing that article. And I spoke to Len, and he actually was the originator of the 5 components of the vertebral subluxation complex. And he did that way, way, way back in the 60s, and it was popularized in the 70s, and Joe Felicia, got, who I love, who got a lot of approvals by the ICA, and then other people from Life and other places really ran with that. But really, it was theory. And when you look at all research starts with a hypothesis. And when you look at vertebral subluxation, and it goes back to D.D. Palmer, his vitalistic approach to health. And then you look at B.J. Palmer, and when they had their green books in science, and they said bone on nerve. When you think about how they hypothesize bone on nerve with virtually no technology other than an X-ray, which really doesn't show anything, they were actually correct, but in the wrong place. There is no bone on the nerve root. The bone on the nerve comes at the facets, and the nerve is the nociceptors. And then the nerves in the joint capsule get fired. The mechanoreceptors, which are your Pacinian corpuscles, Ruffini corpuscles, Golgi ligament organs, and nociceptors, all those technical things that us nerds know. So when you look at those things in bone on nerve, and you look at vertebral subluxation complex, it was a great jumping off point. But do we really want to introduce another level of language into the mix to level or rend another level of confusion? And my answer was no. After doing a lot of research, and Eric and I talked about this, Dr. Kaplan, a lot, and I've talked to leaders in all walks of chiropractic. I mean, you have certain doctors on the far left or schools on the far left say you must use vertebral subluxation complex with everyone. Then there's people on the far right says, it's a bunch of crap, you should never use it, there's nothing in the literature. And then you have everyone in the middle confused. Can you imagine how confusing that is to a neurosurgeon and an orthopedist or a neurologist trying to work with us? It's so confusing. There's no consistency, and it's even confusing within our own profession. So where do we go? Well, we go with what's established. And I found the answer in the ICD-10 annals in the books. And there is subluxation in there, and vertebral subluxation, but it's specifically not meant for the chiropractic genre of subluxation. Then we look at segmental dysfunction, and it really doesn't answer any of those things. The answer really comes, which is where we should all band around, is biomechanical lesions of the spine. There's a code for it. Think about what a subluxation is. It's a bone out of position, it's got inflammation, it's got a neurological content, it can have degeneration as a result of that, it's got a fixation. All of those things are subluxation, but there are no codes for that. But if you use the code biomechanical lesion, now if you understand hierarchy of ICD, you can use that in your first position. Now in your second position, you can add inflammation. Edema, the same thing. You can add muscle spasticity. You can add fixation. You can add degeneration. You can further quantify that. And now we're talking the same language as every single person in the medical community, because we are consistent with ICD-10 and soon to be 11. We're consistent with what everyone's talking about. But now we get into another issue. Joe, what if, and you're a chiropractor, and Jackie, you've been around chiropractic long enough, you do realize that our penetration or utilization in the population is only, it's reported 10%, but the reality is it's close to 7%. It fluctuates, it goes back and forth. We're only treating 7% of the population. Can you imagine if we morphed to treating 30% of the population in a month, what that would do to our schools or doctors? Mm-hmm. There's only pandemonium.
Overflowing, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. You would pick and choose which patients you would see. The schools would have to turn away 9 out of every 10 students that are applying. And we're coming close to that. And how do we get there? Part of this conversation is how we get there. Right. Because if you look at what the 5th most prevalent diagnoses in primary care offices and emergency rooms are back-related issues, back pain. And 99% of every ER doc and primary care doc diagnoses it non-specific back pain. Mm-hmm. That's not true. It's exceedingly specific. But when you start calling it a vertebral subluxation complex, go prove it, go verify it, go find it in the literature. It doesn't exist. When you start calling it a biomechanical lesion, that exists in ICD. People understand that. Panjabi and White talked about it in the 70s. Then you've got a myriad of people explaining all of these things. Now there are tools out there. There's companies, I work with a company called Simverta that actually clearly defines where that biomechanical lesion is. It demonstratively shows you. When you could do show and tell, when I do this with surgeons, I had one primary care doctor, he said, my God, it's non-specific. I showed him this tool, showed him exactly where the lesion was. We call it a subluxation complex. It's a biomechanical failure. He goes to me, oh my God, Mark, who's the closest chiropractor? And he was in Yonkers, New York. Who's the closest chiropractor you have here? I can send probably 15 to 20 patients a day. We see 150 patients in our primary care office a day. We can say, because he's visually saw the biomechanical lesion. It's in the literature. It's in the ICD. So if we try to keep beating the bandwagon of subluxation, we're really keeping ourselves at the 7%. There's a caveat. What do we do with subluxation? We do not get rid of it, folks. It's our history. It's who we are. We don't need to redefine ourselves. We need to evolve and further clarify ourselves. We need to teach subluxation, but we need to teach how to communicate it a little bit more consistently with mainstream medicine. They see 99% of the population. we see 7%. Why do I want to keep fighting for 7% when I can tap in to 99%? It just doesn't make sense. So when you look at it along those lines, you can maintain our identity because you don't want to rebrand yourself. We've been rebranding ourselves since 1895. You don't want to rebrand yourself, but you need to evolve based upon the evidence in the literature. And this is all evidence-based in the literature. It's fraught with literature. I mean, a lot, okay? So we need to rebrand ourselves with the evidence in the literature, evolve in how we communicate, and tap into mainstream medicine with things they don't know what to do with. Sure. Medicine has an 89% failure rate in diagnosing musculoskeletal problems. That's right from a research article in Harvard. 89% failure rate when we help over 93% and they can't even diagnose it. But when you give them the evidence with tools, as I mentioned, Sinverta is one of them. I'm sure there are other tools out there. I just don't know what they are. When you have the evidence to show people those things and show the medical counterparts, and imagine a legislator, oh, I want to prove vertebral subluxation and get it approved. Well, what is it? Now you got two different groups of chiropractors going in, one far left, one far right, giving the legislator exact opposite information. The guy's going to think we're nuts, and they do. So a consistent message that's evidence-based that will help us tap into mainstream, which will resolve our utilization problem and help put this stupid fight to end within our profession.
So, Mark, you mentioned Sinverta. Can you explain a little bit about what that does? Is that an X-ray analysis software, or is that body motion, range of motion? How does it determine these biomechanical lesions that you're describing?
Sinverta is an X-ray digitizing analytical tool. Many people think that X-ray digitizing is only for something called AOMSI, alteration of motion segment integrity, used in personal injury cases to determine laxity of ligament. And it is, and Sinverta does that also. But what it does on top of that, it's able to determine and analyze biomechanical dysfunction. And it's done either statically with the patient standing still or the patient in motion, flexion, extension, because the ligament only has a certain amount of tolerance. And from that, you're able to get the vector of adjustment that you're supposed to do. It'll tell you where to adjust, when you've attained MMI, and it gives you the exact level of lesion. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my career. I've been working with our programmers and teams of researchers for over 7 years now to develop this. And I mean, we're constantly evolving. I mean, we had a meeting this morning. The new literature came out. We're changing it. We're constantly evolving and keeping it contemporary. So people can go to Sinverta.com and look it up. They can call me. This isn't really a plug for Sinverta, but it's a plug for everyone to be able to demonstratively show what you're treating, and I don't care how you do it.
Well, you're mentioning something about motion, right? And this is a intersegmental motion. And you mentioned of course, legendary technique instructor Dr. Leonard Fay,
in the article,
co-founder of the Motion Palpation Institute. Well, even in this earlier. So, is it consistent with how he would describe the assessment portion through motion palpation? Right.
Dr. Fay, and I quote, says, "Thank God someone took what I did to the next level because we have to evolve." And you know what? I'm 66 years old. There's going to be someone behind me picking up the work. Maybe it'll be you, Joe. I don't know. I hope so. I hope it's somebody. I'll pick up the work that I'm doing and take it to the next step. We constantly have to evolve. We can't keep holding on to 1895 or we're going to end up like the dinosaurs, you know?
Now, how has this type of information translated? You're, of course, the founder of the Academy of Chiropractic and the Doctor's PI program. How does that translate into some of these other areas that you have been educating for so long on in communicating injury following car accidents or through rehabilitation?
Well, here's the thing. I actually came across this looking how the brain is involved when there's a lesion at the spine, a subluxation, a Patho-Neuro-Biomechanical lesion, biomechanical lesion. And I started looking at how the brain affected the human, what we do. And then I found that you have pain in disparate areas. In other words, if you have a lumbar lesion, it'll bring you maybe 2 degrees to the right because the facets don't line up. And then your body's got to create homeostasis plumb right down the middle. So the brain will say to the thoracic area, go left, cervical, go right. And the brain will cause spasticity in those areas to put a little curve in the spine to keep you homeostatically balanced from a biomechanical perspective. That'll cause pain in disparate areas because it'll cause spasm. But when you find the primary lesion, it'll take those disparate areas and start relieving pain in those areas, and the brain's involved. So when I started looking at all of this stuff, and we look at trauma care, and I love trauma care, we're able to determine, if there's a herniated disc, it's easy, and I teach MRI spine interpretation. I've been doing that, for 15 years. That's easy. But then we started to ask the question, what if there's no herniated disc? Where's the pain coming from? So now we're able to see where those pain generators are being derived from, which is at the facet and the facet capsule level, and we're able to see those things. In the personal injury world, it's a no-brainer. It's funny, working with attorneys, using this type of technology in conjunction with demonstrative reporting of other bodily injuries like herniated discs, et cetera. In settlements, we're seeing a 929% increase in settlement for the attorney and a 200% increase in verdicts by using this because it's demonstrable. So Simvert is just one of the tools that we use, but it's made personal injury easy, and as a result, I believe we've gotten 1,575,000, I think that's the number, additional referrals into chiropractic practices. We're moving the needle on utilization because we become the solution to many of the lawyers, many of the surgeons, many of the primary care providers, because we're able to demonstrably show where the lesions are. Demonstrable. Demonstrable means show and tell like you did in kindergarten. Show and tell. And demonstrable means you have to be able to prove to me where's the pain generators coming from. Hey, it might be a disc. And if it's the disc in the lumbar spine, that's going to cause pain, I guarantee you, almost 100% of the time in disparate areas. You might have to elicit that, but it's going to cause biomechanical failures. So you're going to be able to see all of these things. And the really cool part, Joe, and I'm glad you asked that, everything is evidence-based. Everything is in the scientific literature. We're not making it's not theory, it's not I believe, none of that stuff. Everything is in the evidence. And when you play connect the dot, and I've been an author in your journal since 2008. I've written hundreds of articles, hundreds. And other than a few opinion articles, everything I've put in there has had a reference list, everything. Everything's evidence-based. So when you look at the history of the work, and a lot of what I did for you during those years helped me build the foundation to get to this point to say. Because let me tell you, it's not easy to write an article every month. It's not. It's a tremendous amount of time. It's 1 to 3 full days to write an article that's between 1,000. I know you don't like my 3,000-word articles. Your advertisers hate that. Jackie hates that. But even a 1,000-word article, to do it properly, it's 2 full days. A 3,000-word article is 3 full days because you've got to cross-reference everything. But in doing all of those things during the years, it helped build a foundation, and I play connect the dot. All I'm doing is playing connect the dot. And we have something called the U.S. Chiropractic Directory, which I got to change that name. There is a research portal on that, which has many of your articles and hundreds of others. We've gotten close to 22 million hits on there, and some people in the industry get upset because I got more than they do. But it's a free portal for everyone. I don't make any money. Just go to uschiropracticdirectory.com, click on the research tab, and a lot of the evidence is there for you. It's wonderful, and it's easy to use. But everything is connected up. What does this research have to do with this? What does this have to do with pain, the brain, personal injury, subluxation, biomechanical lesions? But right now we have enough tools in our bag. We have enough to be able to legally, defensively, in an evidence-based manner, show a biomechanical lesion of which is in the wheelhouse of what chiropractic is, which resolves all non-specific misnomer diagnoses that medical primaries give to be able to resolve all these issues and treat 99% of those patients that go to the medical side for spinal related issues, which is their fifth most prevalent diagnosis.
So I've really enjoyed over the years talking to you as you're preparing these articles. I've found you as quite a resource just for our own mission of educating the chiropractor across the United States. Of course, your whole program where you're educating for the personal injury as well as the Academy of Chiropractic is an incredible resource. Now, as pertains to the biomechanical lesion side, how does the research demonstrate some of the effects associated with the adjustment? Is there substantial research on this topic?
There is. That's a topic for a different podcast.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
There is a tremendous amount of research of the effects of the chiropractic spinal adjustment. Mm-hmm. Not a little, but a huge amount. Huge. Mm-hmm. And that'll take me at least 25 to 30 minutes to explain in a teaching environment using a PowerPoint background to help you understand.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's just a topic for a different conversation. Now, in one of your previous journals, there is an article about it that was published, and it's the Science of the Chiropractic Spinal Adjustment. It was actually a 5-part series that we ran 5 months in a row, maybe 3-4 years ago, which has the basis of that research, but there is a lot more research behind that. A lot's come out, and it just validates everything.
Anyway, I just wanted to jump in and say, because I know on the TIC Talk program, of course, Chiropractic, I tell you, Dr. Studin, when I was looking at the title on this, we get so much controversy on even addressing this issue. So the fact that you've done it so eloquently in being able to honor the vertebral subluxation complex, as well as, moving forward so that we can kind of create bridges in the healthcare community rather than division. So I'm hoping that we don't get too much problems, but have you noticed, do you get feedback one way or another when you talk about this subject?
I do, and I could care less.
Well, like a New Yorker, right?
Well, I got to tell you something. I am 100% apolitical. I've been invited to speak in almost every walk of this profession, ACA, almost every state in the country, and I gracefully decline. I don't pick sides. I pick the side of chiropractic. There should not be an ACA, by the way. There should not be an ICA. There should be a 1CA and 50 chapters. Mm-hmm. And I'm the only one saying that. And I've written about it. You've actually published that commentary about 5 or 6 years ago.
Sure.
I talk about it. I'm the only one. People are afraid because it's going to cost them political affiliations, businesses. I don't care. Mm-hmm. It's not good for chiropractic. That's all I care about.
But Mark, if I recall correctly, you decided that position after having made a real approach to form your own association, right? And so you saw some of the errors in that decision making, or if I'm
correct, in New York there was an organization, but we didn't do it for philosophical reasons. At that point in time, we did it because the main organization was corrupt. There were people on the take, and we had validation of that. We felt that it was wise to start another organization, but it was the stupidest thing in the world. We should have went into that organization and taken it over from the inside out and righted the ship. Mm-hmm. So that was, in hindsight, a bad move. But we didn't do it for philosophical reasons, never. Or at least I didn't. There were 5 originators at that point in time. But you know what? That was then, back in 1989 when we first did that. So we're talking 43 years ago. Here it is, or 89, 90, it's 33 years ago, I'm sorry. So when I'm in the game, this is my 42nd year in the industry. Here's what I've learned in my 4+ decades. There needs to be one organization. This ACA, ICA stuff, we're the best profession at circling the wagons and shooting in.
Right.
You can preserve everyone's opinion and belief while moving the profession forward responsibly. There's enough evidence in the literature which allows you to practice any way you choose. I am the only person in the country that knows what chiropractic is. And I'm going to be really presumptuous and say that. And here it is. You ready?
Give that information out right now, please.
Chiropractic is what the scope of what your state licensure board allows you to do.
Right.
That's what chiropractic is. That's what you can do. That's it. It's already been clearly defined. Who am I to put my opinion on you to tell what you can do?
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
Your licensure board has already told you what chiropractic is in your state.
Mm-hmm.
I know what the best chiropractic technique is. You ready? It's the one that works best for you. If you don't like it, go learn another one.
Right. I think a lot of people have to hear that. It's we're even working to establish some form of framework internationally. Throughout Central and South America. This is a debate we always have. What is chiropractic, and it's really important to keep the patient in mind, and always, that has to be the center of it. But your regulatory boards are what tell you what you can do, right? So
every state, every country tells you what you can do.
Exactly.
So don't fight each other. If you don't like your scope, get involved in politics. Go to your state capital and fight to get it changed.
Well,
that's all.
And I mean,
I'm not your problem. The licensure board is.
Right. I was going to say, I wanted to jump in because I'm coming from the publisher standpoint over 26 years now. And I've had association leaders, international association leaders, telling me the importance of keeping that subluxation terminology, as if we would be somehow consumed by the medical market the moment that we even tried to play that game. So the concern I have, though, as a patient, as a mother, we all have children who you take to the medical doctors, and you want to make sure that if you're going to take them to a chiropractor, that they're going to be talking the same terminology, because you can't, you got to make sure that we all play nice. And I think the point is, and I think even what COVID has highlighted a lot has been the whole division concept where you just confuse people so much. So I'm starting to look at everything, like anybody who's talking about, rallying.
I don't understand how COVID divided us.
Well, and that's the whole point. It's supposed to be healthcare, that we're all joined together in a common goal, which is the patient's ultimate healthcare. Now, we might disagree on how to get there, but can we play nice and be professionals about it? To me, that's kind of the difference. Now, I get it that there's a lot of fear mongering. There's, definitely life and death scenarios, and it's very emotional. But I think the moment we start seeing people playing, those cards and pushing those nerves, we've all got to take a step back and really work on taking a look at who's saying what and what kind of, do they have any skin in the game? Because as an editor in a publisher standpoint, Dr. Joe and I have to work really hard. And as we're family members, we're siblings. So we're very opinionated, of course. We all have our opinions, but we have to work to step back and say, hey, look, Dr. Studin, he's been around 66 years. You've got skin in the game. You're walking the talk. And, you're not just coming out of an opinion. You've actually got life experience that backs it up. And we're so honored that in this time of really madness about everybody standing up to the mic, being a self-proclaimed professional, an expert in everything on the internet, that we've got people who've got now a track record in the print publication who'll put their name in writing, back it up with evidence and research. And so to me, I really, my hat's off to you, Mark. I mean, whether Dr. Studin, whether our readers all agree or not, I mean, it's for them to decide, like you said. I mean, we really work hard to be on the sidelines and the referee of the conversation, but we're definitely always in the ultimate conversation, which is for the greatest good for the patients. And if we can get more people going to chiropractors and chiropractic healthcare, joined with other healthcare practitioners, I see that's got to be a great thing, right?
I'd like to just finish it up with two small things. One is something you said. People are saying, if we give up subluxation, are we going to give up our identity? You're fighting at the wrong end of the stick. Subluxation is what you shouldn't fight for. The word manipulation is an issue. Osteopaths, physical therapists manipulate. Mm-hmm. We do a chiropractic spinal adjustment. That's what allows us to maintain our unique identity. And that one is the one where fighting for a subluxation is silly, because that's how you manage your case. That's what you're diagnosing across the board. How you treat your patient, no one cares. They only care how you diagnose and manage the case. And when you go to a surgeon, he doesn't say, well, I diagnosed you with a superior inferior extrusion causing thecal sac compression, and I'm going to do a double Trendelenburg triple cut with 4 scalpels on your left side. No one says that. They just say, I diagnosed you with a cord compression, and now you need therapy, surgery, injection. I diagnosed you with a biomechanical lesion. We're going to do a chiropractic spinal adjustment as part of what we're going to do. That's how you maintain your identity, because that's what bonds all chiropractors and keeps us unique from other and disparate healthcare providers who don't do what we do in a high velocity, low amplitude thrust, or for different reasons. Some are trying to do what we do, but keep us unique that way. Subluxation is not, and people say the code, the CPT code, is chiropractic manual, chiropractic manipulation, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, there's room for everyone under one umbrella. Mm-hmm. There really is.
Well, and from the patient's perspective, Mark, honestly, from the patient's perspective, because obviously we all are patients and have our families who are patients of chiropractors, but really the patients don't care what the terminology is. So to me, focusing on the terminology is a divisive tactic that I think that sometimes people utilize to keep us infighting internally and maybe fighting externally. Like you said, like each chiropractor should be free to use the terminology that they want within their state guidelines, but let their practice and their patients decide by the results that they get which doctor they're going to keep going to. And I don't think they really care if it's called chiropractic or anything else. They just want the results.
You're right.
They really want the results.
So, Joe, here's the issue.
There is an issue associated with reimbursement and how insurance interprets what we do, and professional integrity too, to know that the person who's applying that is competent. So by borrowing terminology, then you can assume a certain amount of authority. However, in that realm, Jacqueline, it can be misleading as well. So I think that's why, as a business-to-business publication, when we're talking to chiropractors, that conversation is definitely different than how probably Mark talks to a patient about that. And especially if you're talking to legal authorities, then those terminologies have to be much more clearly delineated.
Yeah, and as long as you stay with an ICD, CPT, and document as required based upon your E&M and SOAP note guidelines, you'll be just fine anywhere. But here's the real issue, Joe, and I'm going to leave this conversation with this one thought. As a practicing doctor, would you rather worry about where your next new patient is coming from, or would you rather worry that you're not going to have the time to treat all the patients calling you in your office?
Well, I think I'd rather not have enough time. I'm worried about that. I'd rather having too much work.
Well, you know what? If we keep going on business as usual and keep fighting with each other over stupidity and not evolving with the evidence in the literature and using the tools in front of us that ICD and CPD give us, we're always going to be in the former of that conversation, worrying about where next new patient's coming from. If you evolve and do the things I've shared with you, I've already proven over the last decade by getting over 1.5 million additional new cases into chiropractic offices simply by using the doctor's clinical excellence and appropriate documentation within the guidelines. It works. It's just easy. We've already proven it. We're not breaking ground here. It just works. We just have to get all the people to stop fighting with each other and start looking what will move the needle. There are too many people fighting for their inch of power within their turf. And there are too many people in influential positions within our industry that work within the federal government or insurance companies at consulting levels, making a lot of money, that control too much of our organizations and control too many things and have TPAs where they're pulling money out of the industry and limiting us to 6 visits and then 1 million different pieces of paper to move forward. There's too much of that to limit. There's too few making so much money out of it that they're preventing us from moving forward. And the rest of the profession has to start opening their eyes and saying, wait, I can make changes, and here's how to do it. But again, topic for another conversation.
It's got everything to do with the medical industrial complex. But I just wanted to say this conversation couldn't have been at a better time, considering all of the opportunity that goes with the way that the United States is reformatting their Medicare healthcare system. Hopefully the powers that be hear this message. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Studin. Jacqueline, did you have any further questions you wanted to add or comments?
No, just I think from the patient's perspective, like I think, Mark, you start off this conversation, how do we get from that 7% to 10% and more of the population? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the patient's concern is the results in the end of the day. So the terminology, definitely, like you guys said, you guys can work that out with the coding. I'm here from the publisher standpoint and the patient thing, and our long-term goal is to get more patients being able to, basically have that dialogue between their medical doctors and a chiropractor, and not where there's a huge divisiveness of one or the other camp, where suddenly if you've chosen one, it's now this huge moral and religious subject. Like you were mentioning too about philosophy on this. At the end of the day, the patients want results. So we've got to work in creating some harmony in that dialogue and have this discussion with chiropractors, amongst chiropractors, so that it's respectful. Because I've seen even on some of these internet surveys we did about this subject matter, and they're completely unprofessional in this dialogue discussing this matter. So it's off the charts how people respond to it that makes I could see how people lose credibility altogether on it. And I know there's emotional subjects, but if they lose respect for one another and talk unprofessionally, even if it's in a chat forum, then we've got a long way to go, I think, as a profession, so that we're on par with all the other ones as well and viewed respectfully.
Well, look for this article, Vertebral Subluxation Complex versus Patho-Neuro-Biomechanical Lesion, authored by Dr. Mark Studin, as well as Dr. Eric Kaplan, on page 18 of the September issue of the American Chiropractor magazine, which should be in your mailbox right around now. If not, find it on digital.theamericanchiropractor.com. Dr. Studin, thank you very much. Get back to your fun in the sun up there in New York.
Thank you. Bye, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk.
All right.
Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.